The rent was due in 3 days, and I had exactly $247 in my checking account. Not enough, never enough. I stared at the eviction notice taped to my apartment door, the third one this year, and felt that familiar weight settle into my chest, the kind that made breathing feel like work. I peeled it off, crumpled it into my jacket pocket, and checked my phone. 4 missed calls from the student loan company. 1 text from Marcus at the funeral home. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Street, Catherine's, Rossi service, 300 cash. $300 for 2 hours of playing piano at a stranger's funeral. It was the best money I'd made all month. My name is Sofia Russo, and at 26 years old, I'd become exactly what my piano professor at Berklee had warned me about. A talented musician with no backup plan, scrambling for gig work that paid in cash and kept the lights on for another week. The dream of concert halls and recording contracts had died somewhere, between my parents' car accident 4 years ago. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. And the mountain of medical debt they'd left behind. Now I played weddings on Saturdays, taught beginner piano to bored 7-year-olds on weekday afternoons, and took whatever funeral gigs Marcus could throw my way. The dead paid better than the living, turns out. They didn't haggle over price or ask for discounts. I walked 3 blocks to the convenience store because the corner market charged 50 cents more for the same instant ramen. Every penny mattered when you were this close to the edge. The cashier didn't look at me as he rang up my dinner. 2 packages of noodles and a bruised apple from the discount bin. $4.32. My apartment was a studio in Dorchester, the kind of neighborhood where you learn to ignore gunshots and keep your head down. The radiator clanked but never quite produced heat. The window overlooked a parking lot where someone's car alarm went off every night at 2 a.m. like clockwork. But it was mine, for 3 more days anyway. I ate standing at the kitchen counter because the single chair I owned was covered in sheet music I couldn't afford to print at the library. My piano, a beaten-up Yamaha upright that had belonged to my mother, took up a quarter of the studio. It was probably worth more than everything else I owned combined, but I'd sooner cut off my hands than sell it. I practiced for 3 hours that night, running through the standard funeral repertoire. Ave Maria, Amazing Grace, The Lord is My Shepherd, songs about death and heaven and peace. Songs that were supposed to bring comfort to people who'd lost someone they loved. I'd played my parents' funeral 4 years ago. My hands had shaken so badly I'd missed half the notes. No one had noticed or cared. They were too busy crying or staring at closed caskets or wondering why a drunk driver got to walk away while 2 good people died on impact. The bitterness should have faded by now. 4 years was long enough to make peace with it, wasn't it? But every funeral I played brought it back. The unfairness, the randomness, the way life could end between one breath and the next, leaving behind nothing but debt and grief and questions that would never get answered. I fell asleep on the couch around midnight, still in my clothes, too tired to bother with the pull-out bed. Tomorrow I'd play for strangers, take the cash, pay what I could toward rent, hope it bought me another month before the inevitable eviction became reality. This was survival. This was my life. And I was so tired of barely hanging on. Street. Catherine's church sat in the North End, the kind of old Boston money neighborhood where the buildings were brick and the cars were German. I took the T, transferring twice, and arrived 15 minutes early because Marcus had drilled into me that funeral pianists were never, ever late. The church was beautiful in that austere Catholic way. High ceilings, stained glass windows that threw colored light across worn wooden pews, the smell of incense and furniture polish. A closed casket sat at the front, covered in white roses. So many roses the fragrance was almost overwhelming. Marcus met me in the vestibule. He was 50, balding, and had been running the same funeral home for 20 years. He knew everyone in Boston's death industry, which made him valuable to someone like me who needed the work. Rossi family, he said, keeping his voice low. Big service. Important people. You know the drill. Play softly. Don't make eye contact. Collect payment after. I'd done this enough times to have it memorized. Exactly. He handed me the program. Wife of Dante Rossi, cancer. 42 years old. Family's torn up about it. He paused, his expression shifting into something more serious. And Sofia, this family, they're connected. If you understand what I'm saying. Be professional. Be invisible. Don't talk to anyone unless they talk to you first. Connected. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. In Boston, in the North End, connected meant one thing. Organized crime. The kind of people who had money and power and didn't operate by normal rules. My stomach tightened, but I nodded. $300. I needed $300 more than I needed to ask questions about who was paying me. The church began filling up around 9:45. I'd positioned myself at the piano in the corner, partially hidden behind a marble column. Perfect spot to observe without being observed. The mourners were exactly what I expected. Expensive suits and designer dresses. Women in black with jewelry that probably cost more than my yearly income. Men with hard eyes and harder expressions. They moved like people who were used to commanding respect, used to getting their way. And then he walked in. I felt him before I saw him. The whole energy of the church shifted. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People turned, straightened, moved, and out of his path like water parting around a stone. He was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a black suit that had definitely been tailored to fit his broad shoulders. Dark hair, slightly too long, pushed back from a face that was all sharp angles and controlled grief. Maybe 35, maybe 40. Hard to tell when someone carried themselves with that kind of authority. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath. Even from across the church, I could see them. Dark brown, almost black, and completely devastated. This wasn't the face of someone attending a funeral out of obligation. This was someone whose entire world had just ended. Dante Rossi. It had to be. The widower. He walked to the casket with measured steps, each one looking like it cost him something. When he reached it, he placed both hands on the white wood, leaned down, and pressed his forehead against it. His shoulders shook once, just once. Then he straightened, his expression smoothing into something hard and unreachable. Marcus appeared at his side, spoke quietly. Dante nodded without looking at him, then took his seat in the front pew, alone. Everyone else in the church stayed back, giving him space, like his grief had created a force field no one dared breach. The priest began the service at 10 exactly. I started playing, letting muscle memory take over. Soft, understated, the kind of background music that filled silence without demanding attention. I watched Dante Rossi through the entire service, watched the way he never cried, never moved, barely seemed to breathe. His hands were clenched on his knees, knuckles white with tension. Once, a woman tried to sit beside him, offer comfort. He turned his head, said something too quiet for me to hear, and she retreated immediately, her face pale. The eulogy was brief. A priest who spoke in platitudes about God's plan and eternal rest. No one else spoke. No family members sharing memories. No friends telling stories. Just silence and grief so thick I could feel it pressing against my ribs. When the service ended, people began filing out. The casket would be moved to the cemetery for burial. I was scheduled to play there too, at the graveside service. But first, there was a reception in the church hall. I had 30 minutes to reset, grab water, and prepare for the next round. I was gathering my sheet music when I felt someone watching me. I looked up. Dante Rossi stood 3 feet away, staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. His face had gone completely white. Those dark eyes were locked on mine with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You," he said. His voice was rough, like he'd been screaming, or hadn't spoken in days. "Who are you?" "Sofia Russo. I'm the pianist. I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Rossi." He took a step closer, then another. Invaded my personal space in a way that should have been threatening but somehow wasn't. He was studying my face like he was trying to memorize every detail. My dark hair, my green eyes, the small scar above my left eyebrow from a childhood fall. "You look..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "You look exactly like her." My heart stuttered. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Your face, your voice." His hand came up, hovering near my cheek but not quite touching. "Even the way you hold yourself. It's..." He seemed to catch himself, pulled back. "I apologize. This is inappropriate. You remind me of my wife." The grief in those words made my chest ache. "I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what you're going through." "No. Flat. Final. You can't." He turned to leave, made it 2 steps, then stopped, looked back at me over his shoulder. "At the cemetery," he said, "there's a song I need you to play. It's not in the program." "Of course. What song?" "La Vie en Rose. Do you know it?" I nodded. The Edith Piaf classic. I'd played it 100 times, though usually for weddings, not funerals. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite hope, but close. Can you play it the way it was meant to be played? Not the American version. The original French arrangement. Slow. Like, he paused, searching for words. Like it's the last song you'll ever play. Yes, I can do that. It was our wedding song. His voice cracked on the last word. She loved it. Said it made her believe in romance even in our world. He laughed, bitter and broken. I need to hear it one more time. At her grave, so she knows I haven't forgotten. Then he walked away, leaving me standing there with my sheet music and a crushing weight of secondhand grief. The cemetery was gray and cold under November clouds that threatened rain. Oak Hill Memorial, one of those old Boston cemeteries where the headstones dated back centuries and money bought you a plot with a view. They'd set up a portable keyboard for me near the gravesite. Not ideal, but it would work. I'd arrived early to test it, make sure the sound would carry properly in the open air. The family plot was impressive. A large section marked with an ornate iron fence and mature oak trees providing shade. Fresh earth had been turned for the new grave. The casket sat on supports above it, still covered in white roses. People began arriving around 11. The same crowd from the church, plus a few additional faces. I recognized some of them from news reports. Politicians, business owners, a few men whose faces I'd seen on wanted posters in the post office. This wasn't just a funeral. This was a gathering of Boston's criminal elite. I kept my head down, focused on the keys, and tried not to think about what Marcus had meant when he said, connected. Dante Rossi was the last to arrive. He stood at the edge of the gathered crowd, isolated despite being surrounded by people. His expression was that same controlled blankness from the church. Grief locked behind walls so high I couldn't see where they ended. The priest spoke. Brief prayers for the dead. Committal rites. Ashes to ashes. Dust to dust. Standard. Catholic funeral liturgy that I'd heard dozens of times. Then he nodded at me. Time for the final song. I placed my hands on the keys, took a breath, and began to play. La Vie en Rose, the original French arrangement. Slow and haunting and achingly beautiful. I'd learned this song when I was 15, had played it at my aunt's wedding, but I'd never played it like this, never poured this much emotion into it. I played it the way Dante Rossi had asked, like it was the last song I'd ever play, like the notes could somehow reach across the divide between living and dead and bring comfort to someone beyond comfort. The melody filled the cemetery, carried on cold November air. I heard someone start crying, heard the rustle of tissues, the quiet sniffles of people trying to maintain composure. I didn't look up, kept my eyes on the keys, fingers moving through the familiar progressions. The song built slowly, reaching the bridge where the melody soared before falling back to that gentle, melancholic refrain. When I reached the final verse, I finally allowed myself to glance at Dante Rossi. He'd moved to stand directly beside the casket. His hand rested on the white wood, palm flat, like he was trying to touch the woman inside through sheer force of will. Tears streamed down his face. Silent, unashamed, the kind of crying that came from somewhere so deep inside it bypassed all defenses. And he was looking at me, not at the casket, not at the grave, at me. Those dark eyes were locked on mine with an expression I couldn't name. It was grief, yes, but it was also something else. Recognition, confusion, something that made my fingers almost stumble on the keys. I finished the song, let the final note hang in the air before fading to silence. For a moment nobody moved. The cemetery was completely still except for the wind moving through the oak trees. Then Dante Rossi spoke. His voice carried across the crowd, rough with emotion but absolutely clear. Play it again. I blinked. I'm sorry? Play it again. He hadn't moved, hadn't taken his eyes off me. Please. This wasn't part of the program, wasn't part of anything Marcus had briefed me on. But the raw need in his voice made it impossible to refuse. I played it again. This time, I watched him the whole way through, watched the way he closed his eyes during certain measures, watched his lips move, maybe singing along, maybe praying, watched the tears continue falling even as his expression remained composed. When I finished the second time, he was standing right beside the keyboard. I hadn't seen him move, hadn't heard him approach. He was just there, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, could smell expensive cologne mixed with cigarette smoke. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That was perfect. Exactly how she would have wanted it. I'm glad I could help. You have her gift." His voice dropped even lower. Isabella could play like that, like the music came from, somewhere beyond technique, like she was channeling something divine. He paused. How long have you been playing? Since I was 5. My mother was a piano teacher. Was? She died 4 years ago. Car accident. Something shifted in his expression. Understanding, maybe. The recognition of shared loss. I'm sorry, losing a parent. He trailed off. It changes you. We stood there, in the cemetery, surrounded by mourners and bodyguards, and the symbols of wealth and power. And for just a moment, we were two people who understood what it meant to lose someone who mattered. The priest cleared his throat. Time to lower the casket. Time to finish this. Dante reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope. Your payment, Marcus said, 300. He handed it to me. It was thick, too thick. Mr. Rossi, this feels like more than 5,000. He said it like it was nothing. Like $5,000 was pocket change. For playing our song the way it deserved to be played. For giving me 2 more minutes with my wife. My hands were shaking as I held the envelope. $5,000, 2 months' rent, my student loan payment, groceries, heat, everything I needed and more. This is too much. I can't. You can, and you will. Not unkind, but absolutely firm. Please, let me do this one thing that matters today. I looked into his eyes and saw he needed this. Needed to give something, control something, make something good happen in the middle of all this grief. Thank you, I whispered. This means more than you know. He nodded once. Then, without warning, he reached out and caught my hand. His grip was warm, solid, surprisingly gentle. He turned my hand over, studying my palm like he was reading my fortune. Sofia Russo, he said slowly, like he was memorizing my name. Where do you live? Warning bells should have gone off. This was a powerful man, a dangerous man, asking personal questions. But something in his tone wasn't predatory. It was desperate. Dorchester? Alone? Yes. His jaw tightened. That's not safe. Not for someone like you. Someone like me? Someone who looks like... He stopped himself. Someone who deserves better than Dorchester. Before I could respond, one of his men approached. Mid-40s, built like a linebacker, with the kind of face that had seen violence up close. Boss, they're ready to lower the casket. Dante's whole demeanor changed. The grief-stricken husband disappeared, replaced by something harder, colder. The man who commanded respect through fear as much as loyalty. I'll be right there, Luca. He looked back at me, released my hand slowly, like it cost him something. Thank you again, Sofia. You gave me a gift today. He walked back to the grave. I watched as they lowered the casket into the ground, watched him throw the first handful of dirt, watched him stand there long after everyone else had started leaving, just staring at the earth that now covered his wife. Marcus appeared at my elbow. Time to go. I'll walk you to the tea station. I gathered my things, packed up the keyboard, and started toward the cemetery gates. I'd made it maybe 20 feet when I heard my name. Miss Russo. I turned. Luca, the linebacker, was jogging toward me. Mr. Rossi wanted me to give you this. He handed me a business card. Simple, elegant, just a name and a phone number. He said if you ever need anything at all, you call that number, day or night. I stared at the card. Why would I need? Just keep it. Luca's expression was unreadable. Trust me, you might need it sooner than you think. Then he was gone, striding back toward the grave where Dante Rossi still stood vigil over his wife's final resting place. Marcus and I walked in silence to the tea station. He didn't ask about the envelope or the business card or the way Dante Rossi had looked at me like I was a ghost made flesh. We parted ways at the platform. I rode the train home with $5,000 in my bag and a business card burning a hole in my pocket. I should have thrown the card away. Should have taken the money, been grateful for the windfall, and never thought about Dante Rossi again. But when I got home, I tucked that card into my wallet, right behind my license, where I'd see it every time I opened it, just in case. Because something had happened in that cemetery, something I didn't fully understand. But in the way Dante Rossi had looked at me, in the desperation when he'd asked me to play that song again, in the weight of his hand on mine, I'd felt something shift, some invisible thread being pulled taut between us, and I had the sinking feeling that whatever had started today wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The $5,000 lasted exactly 3 weeks. Rent, 2 months paid in advance, which bought me breathing room I hadn't had in over a year. Student loan payment, minimum, but enough to stop the calls. Overdue electric bill, grocery shopping, and a real store instead of the convenience store. New strings for the piano. A winter coat that didn't have holes in the pockets. By the time I was done being responsible, I had $400 left. I put it in a savings account I'd opened years ago and forgotten about. Emergency money, just in case. I told myself I'd never use Dante Rossi's business card. Told myself the funeral had been a one-time thing, a moment of grief-induced connection that meant nothing in the harsh light of day. I was wrong about that. It started with the flowers. They arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after the funeral. A delivery guy knocked on my door holding a bouquet so massive he could barely see around it. White roses, at least 3 dozen, arranged with the kind of precision that screamed expensive florist. The card read, "Thank you for the gift of music. Dr." I should have been flattered. Should have thought it was a sweet gesture from a grieving widower who'd appreciated my work. Instead, ice slid down my spine. Because Dante Rossi knowing my address meant he'd looked me up. Meant someone had researched me, found where I lived, confirmed I was real and reachable. I threw the flowers away that night. Couldn't stand looking at them. Couldn't shake the feeling that they represented something more than gratitude. The second delivery came on Thursday. Not flowers this time. A box from a boutique in Newbury Street, the kind of place where a single scarf cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Inside was a winter coat. Cashmere, charcoal gray, with buttons that looked like they might actually be real silver. The kind of coat that turned heads. The kind that said money and taste and someone cares about you. No card this time. Didn't need one. I knew who it was from. I sat on my couch holding that coat for 20 minutes, trying to figure out what it meant. Was this generosity? Gratitude? Or something else? Something that felt like the slow tightening of invisible strings? I called Marcus. He answered on the third ring, sounding harassed. "Sofia, I'm in the middle of a service. What, did you give Dante Rossi my address?" Silence. Long enough that I knew the answer before he spoke. He asked, "What was I supposed to say? No to Dante Rossi? You could have asked me first. Kid, you don't understand how this works. When men like that ask for something, you give it to them. It's that simple. He's sending me things. Flowers, gifts. So? He's being generous. That's a good thing. Marcus, Sofia, listen to me. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know these families. Dante Rossi is one of the most powerful men in Boston, and he just lost his wife. If he wants to send you flowers or coats or whatever else makes him feel better, you smile, say thank you, and don't ask questions." He paused. "Unless he's asking for something inappropriate?" "No, nothing like that." "Then what's the problem?" I didn't have an answer. Not one that made sense out loud. How could I explain that it felt like being noticed by something predatory? That generosity from someone with that much power felt less like kindness and more like ownership? "Just be careful," Marcus said, his tone softening slightly. "Don't lead him on if you're not interested. But don't insult him either. These aren't people you want to offend." He hung up before I could respond. I wore the coat that night when I went to teach piano to the 7-year-old who couldn't remember to curve her fingers. It was warm, warmer than anything I'd owned in years. And when I caught my reflection in a store window, I barely recognized myself. I looked like someone who had money, someone who mattered. It terrified me how good that felt. The third contact came on Saturday night. I was playing at a wedding in Cambridge, one of those trendy warehouse venues that charged a fortune to get married, surrounded by exposed brick and Edison bulbs. The couple was young, probably mid-20s, glowing with that particular brand of optimism that came from not yet understanding how hard marriage could be. I played during cocktail hour, background music, while people drank overpriced wine and talked too loudly. Nobody paid attention to the pianist. I'd learned to expect that. I was furniture that happened to make sound. I was midway through all of me when I felt it again. That prickling awareness that someone was watching. I looked up. Dante Rossi stood near the bar, wearing a dark suit and an expression that was carefully neutral. He wasn't supposed to be here. This wasn't his event. But there he was, holding a glass of whiskey and staring at me like I was the only person in the room. My fingers stumbled, just for a second, but enough that I had to recover, find the melody again, push through the sudden spike of adrenaline. He waited until I finished the song, until the scattered applause had died down, before he approached. "Miss Russo." His voice was exactly as I remembered. Rough, accented, controlled. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Mr. Rossi." I kept my hands on the keys, like they could somehow protect me. "This is unexpected." I was in the area, Heard music. Recognized your playing. He set his glass down on top of the piano. You have a distinctive style. Once you've heard it, you don't forget. How did you know I'd be here? I didn't. Something flickered in his eyes. But I'm glad I was right. We stared at each other for a long moment. Around us, the wedding continued. Laughter, conversation, the clink of glasses. But we existed in a bubble separate from all of it. I received your gifts, I said carefully. The flowers, the coat. They were very generous, but you'd prefer I stop. I'd prefer to understand why you're sending them. He picked up his whiskey, took a slow sip, considering. You look like her, my wife, Isabella. The resemblance is. He paused, searching for words. Uncanny, disturbing, even. When I saw you, at the funeral, for a moment, I thought she'd come back. That God had taken pity on me and given me a second chance. The raw honesty in his voice made my throat tight. I'm not her, Mr. Rossi. I know that. Harsh. Believe me, I know. But you played our song the way she would have played it. You have her coloring, her build, even some of her mannerisms. The way you tilt your head when you're concentrating. The way your fingers move on the keys. His grip tightened on the glass. I can't stop thinking about you. And I don't know if that's grief making me crazy or something else. This was dangerous territory. I could feel it in my bones. A grieving man, a powerful man, fixating on a woman who reminded him of what he'd lost. Nothing good could come from this. I think you need time, I said gently. Time to grieve properly, to heal. And I don't think seeing me is helping with that. You're probably right. He finished his whiskey in one swallow. But I don't care. Mr. Rossi. Dante. My name is Dante. Use it. The command in his voice made me bristle. I'm working. I can't have this conversation right now. Then when? When can we have this conversation? I don't think we should. Too late. He leaned closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the shadows under his eyes that suggested he wasn't sleeping. You're already in my head, Sofia. You're there when I close my eyes, when I walk past the piano in my house, when I drive past this neighborhood and hear music. His voice dropped lower. I'm not trying to replace her. I know that's impossible. But I need to understand why seeing you feels like being able to breathe again for the first time in weeks. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my thighs, trying to steady them. This isn't healthy, for either of us. I didn't say it was healthy. I said it was necessary. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. I'm sending a car for you tomorrow. 2 p.m. It'll take you to my house in Brookline. We'll talk, properly, away from weddings and funerals and public spaces. I'm not going to your house. Why not? Because I don't know you. Because you're... I stopped myself. Because I'm what? Dangerous? A slight smile. Not quite bitter, but close. I am. But not to you. Never to you. You can't promise that. I can and I do. He stood, straightening his jacket. 2:00, Sofia. The car will wait for 30 minutes. If you don't come out, it'll leave, and I'll respect your decision. But I hope you come. I think we both need answers to questions we haven't even figured out how to ask yet. He walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the crowd of wedding guests like he'd never been there at all. I played for another hour in a daze, my fingers moving through songs while my mind raced. Everything logical said, stay away. Dante Rossi was complicated and dangerous and drowning in grief. Getting involved with him would be stupid at best, catastrophic at worst. But he was also the first person in 4 years who'd looked at me like I was more than just a struggling musician, who'd seen something in me worth noticing, worth pursuing, worth $5,000 in expensive gifts, and showing up at random weddings. And God help me, I wanted to understand what that something was. The car arrived at exactly 2:00 on Sunday afternoon. I'd spent the morning convincing myself not to go, then convincing myself to go, then back to not going. The internal debate had left me exhausted and anxious, pacing my apartment in the cashmere coat he'd given me because it was the warmest thing I owned. When the Blacktown car pulled up to my building, I stared at it through the window for a full minute. Last chance to walk away. Last chance to be sensible. I grabbed my bag and went downstairs. The driver was a woman in her 40s, professional and polite. She opened the door for me without comment, and I slid into leather seats that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The drive to Brookline took 20 minutes. We passed through neighborhoods where the houses got progressively larger, the lawns more manicured, the cars more expensive, old money mixed with new, behind gates and walls, and the kind of privacy that wealth could buy. Dante's house sat at the end of a private drive, hidden behind iron gates that opened automatically as we approached. It was a sprawling colonial, all white columns and black shutters, surrounded by gardens that were still beautiful even in late November. The driver pulled up to the front entrance. "Mr. Rossi is expecting you in the music room. Through the foyer, second door on the left." "Thank you." I stood on the marble steps for a moment after she drove away, staring at the massive front door and wondering what the hell I was doing. Then I rang the bell before I could change my mind. Dante answered within seconds. He wore jeans and a black sweater, more casual than I'd seen him before. It made him look younger, more approachable, but his eyes held the same intensity that had unnerved me at the wedding. "You came." Relief flooded his expression. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. But you're here now. That's what matters." He stepped back, gesturing me inside. "Please, come in." The interior was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive, but not ostentatious. High ceilings, hardwood floors, art that looked original and probably was. Everything carefully curated to project success and taste. But it also felt empty, lived in, but lonely. Like a house that had been designed for two people and was now occupied by one. He led me through the foyer to a room that made my breath catch. The music room was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the garden. A grand piano sat in the center, a Steinway that had been lovingly maintained, shelves lined with vinyl records, and a sound system that probably cost more than everything I owned. "This is beautiful," I said quietly. "Isabella's space." His voice was tight. "She spent hours in here, playing, listening, just existing. I haven't been able to come in here since she died. Until today." I looked at him sharply. "Why today?" "Because you're here. And somehow, that makes it bearable." The vulnerability in those words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just attraction or fixation. This was a drowning man reaching for anything that felt like air. "Dante." I used his first name deliberately, watched him react to it. "I can't be her replacement." "I won't be. I'm not asking you to be." He moved to the piano, ran his fingers along the edge. "I'm asking you to help me understand why seeing you doesn't hurt the way everything else does. Why hearing you play makes me feel something other than grief for the first time in months. That's still not healthy." I didn't say it was. He looked at me directly. "But I'm drowning, Sofia. And you're the only thing that feels like solid ground. So forgive me if I'm not ready to let go of that yet. I should have left. Should have told him to get therapy, to give himself time, to stop putting this kind of pressure on a stranger. Instead, I walked to the piano and sat down. What was her favorite piece? I asked. Debussy, Clair de Lune. My fingers found the keys. I played it from memory, the way my mother had taught me. Slow and dreamy and achingly beautiful. The kind of piece that felt like moonlight made sound. Dante stood by the windows, his back to me, shoulders tense. I watched him while I played, saw the way his hand came up to press against the glass, saw the tremor in his fingers. When I finished, the silence was profound. She would have played it faster, he said without turning around. More technically perfect. But you played it with more emotion, more heart. He finally looked at me. That's the difference between you and her. Isabella was trained at Juilliard. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. She played like a professional. You play, like you're trying to heal something broken inside you. The observation was so accurate it stole my breath. My parents, I said quietly. Fine, I'm still trying to play through losing them. I know. I had someone look into your background. He said it without apology. Car accident. 4 years ago. No other family except a cousin in California you haven't spoken to in 2 years. You're alone, Sofia. Just like me. I should have been angry about the invasion of privacy. Should have demanded to know what else he'd learned about me. But I was too tired to maintain the pretense. Why am I here, Dante? Really? He crossed the room, sat on the piano bench beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the cedar and smoke that seemed to cling to his clothes. Because I'm tired of being alone in this house. Because you're the first person who's looked at me and seen something other than a criminal or a threat or a business opportunity. His hand came to rest on the basis, keys next to mine, not touching, but close. And because I think you're just as alone as I am, just as tired of pretending you're fine when you're barely holding it together. The words hit too close to home. I felt them land somewhere deep in my chest, in the place where I kept all the loneliness and exhaustion and fear that came with surviving on razor-thin margins. What do you want from me? I don't know yet. Honest, raw, maybe just company. Someone to sit in this room with me who doesn't make it feel like a mausoleum. Someone who understands that grief doesn't have a timeline or follow rules. He paused. Is that something you could do? Just exist here with me sometimes? Play the piano, talk, help me remember how to be something other than a widower? It was the most unreasonable request I'd ever heard. He was asking for companionship, for presence, for the simple act of not being alone, and he was offering me the same thing in return. I thought about my empty apartment, my absent social life, the way I'd built walls around myself after my parents died because it was easier than risking more loss. Okay, I heard myself say, but we need boundaries. This is friendship, companionship, nothing more. I'm not Isabella. I won't pretend to be. Agreed. And if it becomes too much, if this starts to feel unhealthy, I walk away. No questions, no arguments. Agreed. He held out his hand. Friends? I looked at his outstretched hand, at this powerful man making himself vulnerable, asking for something as simple as human connection. I took it. Friends. His grip was warm and solid, and when he smiled, really smiled for the first time since I'd met him, it transformed his entire face, made him look younger, less burdened, almost carefree. Good. Then stay for dinner. My housekeeper, Rosa, makes the best osso buco you've ever tasted. And you can tell me about your music, your life, all the things I couldn't learn from a background check. I should have said no, should have maintained distance. But his smile was genuine, and the music room was warm, and I was so tired of eating instant ramen alone in my apartment. Okay, I said. Dinner. Dinner turned into 3 hours of conversation that flowed easier than it should have. We talked about music, about Boston, about the ways grief changed you in unexpected ways. Dante told me about Isabella, about their 10-year marriage, about how cancer had stolen her in brutal increments. I told him about my parents, about Berklee, about the slow realization that talent wasn't enough to make it in music, that you needed luck and connections and a safety net I'd never had. Rosa, the housekeeper, served food and disappeared with the kind of discretion that suggested she'd worked for the family a long time. The osso buco was as good as Dante had promised. Rich and tender, the kind of meal that felt like love made edible. By the time I left at 9, something had shifted between us. The awkward tension from earlier had eased into something more comfortable. Not quite friendship yet, but the foundation of it. Dante walked me to the car, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. Thank you, he said quietly. Today was the first day that didn't feel unbearable. I'm glad I could help. Will you come back? Maybe Tuesday? We could play together. I'm terrible, but Isabella tried to teach me a few things. The eagerness in his voice was almost boyish, like he was afraid I'd refuse. Tuesday works. I have a student until 4, but after that. Perfect. I'll send the car. I can take the tea. The car is safer. Not a suggestion. A statement of fact delivered with the kind of authority that suggested arguing would be pointless. I let it go. Picked my battles. The driver took me home through late Sunday traffic. I watched the city pass by the window and tried to process what had just happened. I'd agreed to spend time with Dante Rossi, a man I barely knew, a man with connections to organized crime. A man who looked at me like I was simultaneously the answer to all his problems and the source of new ones. This was either the best decision I'd made in years or the worst. I was terrified I wouldn't know which until it was too late. Tuesday came faster than I expected. I taught my student, endured her mother's complaints about practice habits, and was home by 4:15. I changed into nicer jeans and a sweater that didn't have holes, applied minimal makeup, and told myself this was just dinner with a friend. A friend who happened to be a wealthy widower with possible mob connections. The car arrived at 5. Different driver this time, but same professional courtesy. The gates opened as we approached Dante's house, and I felt that flutter of anxiety mixed with anticipation. He met me at the door, wearing dark slacks and a navy sweater that made his eyes look almost black. Sofia. The warmth in his voice made something in my chest loosen. I'm glad you're here. Me too. We spent 2 hours in the music room. Dante played badly, fingers stumbling over simple scales, but with enthusiasm that made me smile. I corrected his hand position, showed him how to relax his shoulders, played simple duets that he could actually manage. He laughed when he made mistakes, actually laughed. The sound was rusty, like he was out of practice, but genuine. Isabella had more patience, he said after murdering chopsticks for the third time. She'd make me play it 100 times until I got it right. I'm not Isabella, I reminded him gently. No. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You're Sofia. Which is better? Before I could process that statement, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his entire demeanor changed. The laughing man disappeared, replaced by something harder. I need to take this. I'll be right back. He left the music room, but I could hear his voice in the hallway. Low, rapid Italian, punctuated with words I recognized. Business, territory, problems. He returned 10 minutes later, looking exhausted. Everything okay? I asked. Work. He waved it off. Nothing for you to worry about. But something in his eyes told me it was more than that. Something serious. Something dangerous. Dante, I have a question. He cut me off, clearly not wanting to discuss whatever that call had been about. Do you have plans for Thanksgiving? The subject change was so abrupt I blinked. Thanksgiving? That's in 2 days. I'm aware. Do you have plans? Not really. I was going to work, actually. Marcus usually has holiday funerals that pay double. His expression darkened. You were going to play funerals on Thanksgiving? It's good money. Cancel it. Excuse me? Cancel it. Come here instead. Rosa's making dinner for half the neighborhood. My family, some associates, people who have nowhere else to go. He paused. I want you here. Dante, I can't just... Please. The single word stopped my protest. I don't want to spend the first holiday without Isabella surrounded only by people who knew her. I need... He struggled to articulate it. I need someone who sees me as I am now. Not who I was with her. Please, Sofia. The vulnerability in his voice made my resistance crumble. Okay, I said quietly. Okay, I'll come. Relief flooded his features. Thank you. We spent another hour talking before the car took me home. But something had shifted again. The boundaries we'd established were already blurring. This wasn't just companionship anymore. This was something more complicated. Something that made my pulse race and my palms sweat. I was getting in too deep with Dante Rossi. And the terrifying part was that I didn't want to stop. Thanksgiving dinner was chaos in the best possible way. Dante's house was filled with people. Extended family, business associates, people whose connections I didn't ask about because I suspected the answers would worry me. Rosa had outdone herself with food. Multiple turkeys, homemade pasta, dishes I couldn't name but tasted incredible. Dante introduced me as my friend Sofia, the pianist. People nodded politely, asked surface questions, then moved on. I was grateful for the anonymity, for being just another guest instead of someone who needed explaining. We ate at a table that sat 20, surrounded by conversation in English and Italian, with laughter and arguments and the comfortable chaos of family. Dante sat at the head, with me on his right. His hand found mine under the table during grace, squeezed once, then let go. But the touch lingered, made me hyper-aware of how close he was, how his thigh occasionally brushed mine, how he'd lean close to murmur translations when someone spoke in Italian. After dinner, a group of men disappeared into Dante's office. Business, someone said, but the tension in their shoulders suggested it was more than that. I helped Rosa clear dishes, grateful for something to do with my hands. He seems happier, she said quietly in accented English. Since you've been coming around. Lighter. I'm just a friend. She didn't sound convinced. Friends are good, but you are more than friend, I think. You are hope. First hope he's had since Isabella died. Before I could respond, one of the men from the office appeared in the doorway. Sofia? Dante wants to see you. Warning bells went off in my head, but I followed him down the hallway to Dante's office. The room was all dark wood and leather, lined with books and expensive artwork. 6 men sat in various chairs, all of them watching me with expressions that ranged from curious to hostile. Dante stood by the window, tension radiating from every line of his body. Sofia, I need you to listen carefully to what I'm about to say. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the anger beneath it. And then I need you to decide if you want to continue our friendship. My stomach dropped. What's going on? There's a problem. With another family, the Marcellos. They've been pushing into territory that's been ours for 30 years. Tonight, they made it clear they're not backing down. He turned to look at me directly, which means things are about to get violent, dangerous, and anyone connected to me becomes a target. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. You're telling me this because I'm connected to you now, I said slowly. Yes. Not deeply, not obviously. But we've been seen together. You've been to my house multiple times. That's enough. He crossed the room, stopped directly in front of me. I'm giving you a choice, Sofia. Walk away now. Tonight. And I'll make sure the Marcellos know you meant nothing. That you were just a pianist I hired. You'll be safe. Or you stay. You accept that being close to me comes with risks. And I promise you, I will do everything in my power to keep you protected. His hand came up, cupped my face. But I can't guarantee your safety. Not completely. Not in this world. I should have walked away. Should have chosen self-preservation over this complicated thing building between us. But I looked into his eyes and saw more than just a dangerous man. I saw someone who'd given me the first real connection I'd had in years. Someone who'd made me remember what it felt like to matter to another person. I'll stay, I said. Sofia. I'll stay. I repeated, stronger this time, but I need you to be honest with me. All of it. No more vague references to work or business. If I'm staying, I need to know exactly what I'm staying for. Something shifted in his expression. Pride, maybe. Or relief. Okay, he said. Then sit down, because this is going to take a while. The truth was worse than I'd imagined, and somehow exactly what I'd expected. Dante Rossi wasn't just connected to organized crime. He ran it, the entire North End operation, plus significant portions of the waterfront, the financial district, territories that generated millions in revenue from legitimate businesses, and less legitimate activities I didn't want to examine too closely. His men weren't employees. They were soldiers. The office meetings weren't business discussions. They were war councils. And Isabella, his perfect dead wife, had known all of it, had been born into this world, raised to understand its rules, married Dante because their families had alliances that needed strengthening. She made me want to be better, Dante said quietly after the other men had left. We sat in his office, just the two of us, with the weight of truth between us. Made me believe I could build something legitimate, something our children could inherit without shame. You didn't have children. The cancer took that possibility before we could try. Pain flickered across his face. Another thing it stole from us. I absorbed all of this, trying to reconcile the man who'd played chopsticks badly in the music room with the crime boss, who controlled half of Boston. The Marcellos, I said. What do they want? Everything I have. They've been circling for years, waiting for weakness. Isabella's death gave them an opening. His jaw tightened. They think grief has made me vulnerable. Careless. They're wrong. What happens now? Now I remind them why my family has held this territory for 3 generations. He looked at me with eyes that had gone cold. It won't be pretty, Sofia. And I need you to understand that the man you've gotten to know these past weeks, the one who laughs and plays piano and eats dinner like a normal person, that's only part of who I am. I know. Do you? He stood, crossed to me, pulled me up to face him. Because once you see the other side, you can't unsee it. Once you know what I'm capable of, you can't unknow it. And I need you to be sure, absolutely certain, that you can live with that. I should have been terrified, should have run. But instead, I reached up and touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw, the barely controlled violence simmering beneath his skin. I've already decided, Dante. I'm staying. Something broke in his expression. The control he'd been maintaining shattered. He pulled me against him, his arms crushing me to his chest, his face buried in my hair. You shouldn't, he whispered. You should run as far and fast as you can, but I won't. We stood like that for a long moment, holding each other while the world outside prepared for war. The attack came 3 days later. I was at Dante's house, in the music room, playing through a Rachmaninoff piece I'd been working on. He sat in the leather chair by the window, ostensibly reading, but I could feel his attention on me. The explosion shattered the afternoon quiet. Windows blew inward, glass raining down like deadly confetti. I threw myself away from the piano, hit the floor hard enough to knock the breath from my lungs. My ears rang. Smoke poured through the broken windows. Dante was on me in seconds, his body covering mine, shielding me from the debris still falling. Stay down, he ordered, his voice muffled by the ringing in my ears. Don't move until I say. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. I heard shouting in Italian, heard footsteps thundering through the house, heard more explosions that made the floor shake beneath us. This was real. This was actually happening. Dante's phone was already in his hand. barking orders in rapid Italian. Then he was pulling me up, half carrying me toward a door hidden behind a bookshelf I'd never noticed before. "Safe room," he said shortly. "Reinforced. They can't get in." "What about you?" "I need to coordinate the response. My men are holding them, but I'm not hiding while you fight." The words came out stronger than I felt. "Not a chance. Sofia." I said no. More gunfire. Closer now. Someone screamed, the sound cutting off abruptly. Dante's expression went through several emotions too fast to track. Then he pressed a gun into my hands. Small, black, heavier than I expected. "Safety's here. Point and squeeze. Don't hesitate." He looked into my eyes. "If anyone comes through that door who isn't me or one of my men, you shoot. Understand?" I nodded, my hands surprisingly steady around the weapon. "Good girl." He kissed me hard and fast, tasting like smoke and desperation. "Stay alive, Sofia. That's all that matters." Then he was gone, disappearing into the chaos while I crouched behind an overturned couch with a gun in my shaking hands and the taste of him still on my lips. The battle lasted 17 minutes. I counted every one of them, listening to the sounds of violence echoing through the house. Gunshots. Breaking glass. Men shouting. Screaming. Dying. I thought about my parents, about how quickly life could end, about all the things I'd never said to Dante, never allowed myself to feel because it was safer to keep walls up than risk this kind of loss again. When the shooting finally stopped, the silence was worse than the noise. I stayed frozen, gun aimed at the door, barely breathing. Footsteps approached, heavy, deliberate. The door opened. Dante stood there, covered in blood and soot, a cut above his eye bleeding freely, but alive, standing, whole. I dropped the gun and ran to him. He caught me, held me tight enough to hurt, and I felt him shaking. Actually shaking. This man who commanded armies and showed no fear was trembling in my arms. "It's over," he said into my hair. "They're dead or gone. You're safe. Are you hurt?" "Nothing that matters." He pulled back enough to look at me, his hands framing my face. "I thought I'd lost you. When that first explosion hit, I thought..." His voice cracked. "I can't lose you, Sofia. I can't. You didn't. I'm here. I love you." The words tumbled out raw and unplanned. "I know it's too soon. I know it's complicated. I know I'm still grieving Isabella, and you look like her, and this is all kinds of... I wrong. But I love you. I think I've loved you since you played that song at her funeral, since you looked at me like I was a person instead of a monster." My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts. But through the fear and adrenaline and shock, one truth emerged crystal clear. "I love you too," I whispered. "God help me, I love you too." He kissed me then, desperate and claiming and full of everything we'd been holding back. I tasted blood and smoke and survival, and I kissed him back like he was oxygen and I'd been drowning. When we finally broke apart, his forehead rested against mine. "Marry me," he said. I laughed, slightly hysterical. "We've known each other 3 weeks. I don't care. Marry me. Let me protect you properly. Let me wake up every morning knowing you're mine and I'm yours and nothing can take that away." "Dante, I know it's insane. I know it's too fast. But I just fought off an army for you, and I'll do it again tomorrow in the day. After that, and every day for the rest of my life if that's what it takes to keep you safe. So marry me, Sofia Russo. Make me the luckiest man in Boston." I looked into his eyes and saw my future. Complicated, dangerous, probably shorter than it should be, but also full of music and passion, and someone who saw me completely and loved me anyway. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'll marry you." His smile was brilliant, transforming his blood-stained face into something beautiful. "Good, because I'm never letting you go." We married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at St. Catherine's, the same church where I'd played Isabella's funeral. Father Dominic performed the service with questions in his eyes but blessings on his lips. I wore white. Dante wore black. Rosa cried through the entire ceremony, and when Dante slipped the ring on my finger and promised to love me until death parted us, I believed him with my whole heart. The reception was at his house, rebuilt and reinforced after the attack. Our house now. My piano had been moved into the music room alongside Isabella's Steinway. 2 instruments, 2 women, 2 chapters of Dante's life existing side by side. We danced to La Vie en Rose, our wedding song now. Dante held me close, swaying gently, and whispered in my ear, "Thank you for playing that song. Thank you for staying. Thank you for loving a broken man who didn't deserve a second chance. You're not broken, I said firmly. You're healing. We both are. Together? Together. 6 months later, I played a private concert at Symphony Hall. Front row sat Dante, beaming with pride, surrounded by his men who probably had no appreciation for Debussy but came anyway because their boss's wife was performing. Life wasn't perfect. The Marcello threat still existed, managed but not eliminated. I still played funerals sometimes, though now for choice, rather than necessity. Dante still had nightmares about Isabella, about losing me, about all the ways his world could destroy, and what we'd built. But we had music. We had each other. We had a future we were writing together, one note at a time. And when I played La Vie en Rose in our music room, Dante would stop whatever he was doing to listen, every single time, like it was the first time, like I was the miracle he'd never expected to receive. Play it again, he'd say, his voice soft with love. And I always did. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.